Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. Later in the programme we'll be hearing from Kenya as 6 prominent political figures are named by the International Criminal Court for inciting violence after the last election. And we'll talk to the Justice Minister of Lebanon ahead of the publication of a UN tribunal into the assassination of the former Prime Minister. But first we turn to the country which seems to be in every news story this week. It's Sweden. Yes, last Saturday, for instance, saw 2 explosions in Stockholm, possibly the handiwork of a lone Muslim extremist. Sweden is, of course, also the country which is trying currently to expedite the departure from England on his way to Sweden of the head and founder of WikiLeaks. That's, of course, Julian Assange, who's charged with sex crimes in Sweden. Currently, as we speak, he's on bail, limited bail, in Britain. Will he be extradited to Sweden? And of course, Sweden's Foreign Minister Carl Bildt was the EU's High Representative in Bosnia, negotiating the Dayton peace agreement with Richard Holbrooke, a big name in diplomacy in the world. He died this week, and we'll talk about him too. Carl Bildt now joins me from Stockholm. Foreign Secretary, Mr. Bildt, Carl, thank you very much for being with us today. Of course, the papers here in London today are full of headlines about Mr. Assange. After 9 days jail, Assange heads off with his entourage for mansion arrest rather than house arrest, but a form of bail. Are you disappointed that the verdict went against you, in a sense, in that hearing in London?
Well, I mean, not against me in any sort of way. I mean, this is a purely legal fight between different points of view, and this is the Swedish legal authorities. They have no connection with the political authorities. We have a completely independent judiciary. I know roughly as much about this as you do.
I see.
Not very much.
I see. And here we have the Guardian saying on Channel 4 News last night, Assange maintained he was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by the US with the assistance of the Swedish intelligence service. Is that likely? Is that possible? As you say,
well, that is well, I would say it's complete rubbish. Complete rubbish. The Swedish independent judiciary is not widely known as an agent of the US intelligence or anything of that sort. And as a matter of fact, the case against him is driven by a lawyer in Sweden, which is very much on the political left of our political spectrum. I only know what I read in the newspapers, but that is not a person I would associate with anything that Mr. Assange is implying. So that's complete rubbish, I have to say. I mean, the rule of society is dominated by the rule of the law. Like Sweden or the UK simply doesn't work like that. We have an independent judiciary. It operates according to the law, and there are no connections between the judiciary and political authorities or other authorities of any sort. Wouldn't work in the UK, wouldn't work in Sweden, and is certainly not the case.
Right.
I mean, I understand that he is the subject of certain allegations, and that has to be clarified in court. That's the way it is.
And in fact, I mean, you wouldn't, and it wouldn't take place. Extradition from Sweden to the United States is more unlikely than extradition from Britain, for instance.
I don't know, I have to say, because I have not had reason to study the details of the case since it doesn't come across my table and my desk. Insofar as I follow it, I do as you. I see it in the newspapers now and then, but this is a question solely for the legal authorities, for the courts, and for those that are pursuing the case. I mean, the prosecutor as well as the defense and the lawyers for the girls in this particular case who has brought the case against him. I don't know the merits of the case. I don't know how it's done. I don't know where it's going to end. We have an independent judiciary. That's the way societies like Britain and Sweden works.
And of course, the subject that's concerned people a lot was the dangers that you suffered in Stockholm with the bomber last weekend. Others have said now today that there may have been somebody assisting or present with the bomber. Do you take that on board as possible?
Well, I think the police is now looking into sort of all options. I think all options are on the table. I think it's likely that he was alone at that particular moment, at that particular place. But what there might have been behind it, and in preparations and in inspirations, I think that will take some time to really go to the bottom with. I think they're following a number of different leads at the moment, in cooperation not the least with the UK, but also with other countries, in order to find out as much as possible. What we know is that we were extremely lucky, extremely lucky. I mean, there was an intervention by Almighty in whatever incarnation he appeared that prevented something that could have been a real carnage.
Really serious. Will it have any effect? It won't have any effect of withdrawing troops from Afghanistan or anything like that. You're not going to bow to that suggestion, are you?
No. No,
So
no, no, no. No, 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 of course not. Of course not. I think the effect it's going to have is that we are perhaps somewhat more aware, or the population in general is more aware of the fact that we are living in the same world as everyone else, including the UK or Germany or Spain or Turkey or whatever. This is the world in which we are living. I shouldn't exaggerate it. These are sort of very marginal groups and very marginal individuals. They are very dangerous. But it's not a sort of a mass phenomena, or it's something that presents a major danger to our society. But of course it is a subject of considerable concern, needless to say. And we were lucky. Lucky.
And Sweden's military contribution, apart from that, the other thing that once again the cartoons came up in the killer's, the bomber's message and so on. That seems out of nowhere, that 3 years later, to see that, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, we know this from different cases in different other countries, that they bring up all sorts of issues that could be sort of, can have been brewing there for quite some time in their minds. The process of radicalization of people like this is sometimes a difficult one to understand, but suddenly they find that they have to do something in view of things that could be of marginal importance and could be of great importance to them. In this particular case, he did mention Afghanistan, he did mention cartoons, but what really brought a person like this to try to do what he evidently tried to do, that is, to a lot of us, somewhat of a mystery.
Somewhat of a mystery, it certainly is. Kosovo is a subject that you are very well versed in. That unsettling story this week about the re-elected Prime Minister of Kosovo, what was your reaction when you read that?
Well, I haven't read the report by the rapporteur of the Council of Europe, but I mean, these particular allegations or this particular story has been around for quite some time. So I like to see if there's something new to it. That being said, I think it's up to sort of competent authorities of different sorts to go to the bottom with the story, because it keeps resurfacing. There might be something to it, but if that is the case, I mean, it should be sort of brought before judicial authorities somewhere in order to find out and bring the story to a conclusion. So far it's allegations, but it's allegations of a nature that needs to be sorted out, obviously.
People trafficking and organ harvesting and so on. And do you think, in fact, the Prime Minister should step down while this is investigated, Mr. Thatcher?
Well, no one is guilty until proven guilty. Everyone is innocent until that is the case. And whether I don't know to which extent the rapporteur really makes that connection with him personally. But as I said, these stories have been around for quite some time. I think they were to some extent investigated by the UN, by UNMIC in the past. I don't think they brought it to a conclusion. I don't know if there's anything new in this particular report that was not subject to the investigations by the UN. But it's obviously of importance for everyone concerned that one goes to the bottom with allegations and find out what's really there, if anything.
And the very mention of that part of the world takes us to the subject of Richard Holbrooke, who surprisingly and sadly died suddenly this week. And you were really co-chair with him after Dayton and so on. What's your recollection of Richard Holbrooke, the controversial but sort of dashing figure as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, controversial among many, needless to say, because he had a style that was, he was a fairly self-confident man, and to a certain extent you could say that he had reason to be self-confident. He was a man with a mission. He was a very fierce fighter for all of the causes that he believed in. He was also a very good friend when you were on his side, and we were on the same side essentially, both there in the Balkans for a couple of years and then in Afghanistan. So he will be missed. I mean, he was a force of nature in the world of diplomacy of a sort that you don't very often see. And he was also, I was a diplomat to some extent, of course, but he was also a politician and a street fighter, both as a diplomat and a politician. So he could achieve results, and he did achieve results.
Well, that's a very interesting recollection. The street fighter who had a very strong reputation and for controversy as well as anything else. Well, we do thank you very much for joining us today and covering these, well, the 4 stories about Sweden dominating the press, as we were saying earlier. Thank you very much for being with us, Carl. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much, David. Look forward to being with you again.
Thank you, Carl. And now to a second important case. It's almost exactly 3 years that a disputed election in Kenya led to an explosion of violence which left over 1,000 people dead, and Kenya close at that time to the brink of civil war. This week, the chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court named 6 men that he says are responsible for orchestrating that violence. 3 of them are cabinet ministers and 1 a former police chief. So what impact will this have on Kenya? And will these men ever face charges? Joining me now from Nairobi is John Githongo, a man who knows what it's like to pursue Kenya's political elite. Formerly, he was indeed Kenya's corruption czar, until he was forced into exile for doing his job perhaps just a little too well. John, good to have you with us today. How important are these men who've been named this week? The 6 people who've been named, they are, most of them, quite important, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, the individuals who have been named include some of the most powerful political figures in the country. It also includes the top civil servant in Kenya, the head of the public service and secretary to the cabinet and permanent secretary in the office of the president, the deputy prime minister. And these are, the politicians are not only powerful figures in terms of the administrative structure of the Kenya government, but they're powerful in terms of their political constituencies, which are sizable, robust, and right now in a state of some confusion and bewilderment.
And were you surprised by any of the names on the list, or did it come as roughly in the form that you expected in terms of the names?
There were no big surprises, Sir David. All these names had been subjects of the Nairobi rumor mill for months. We had lists up to 30 long, so you could pick and choose, and so absolutely no surprises.
Does it have any implications, the findings so far to date, on either President Kibaki or Prime Minister Odinga? I mean, they are not named, neither of them are named. I mean, so does it not affect them? Or does it affect them indirectly?
Absolutely, it affects them indirectly, in a very immediate sort of way. These are key figures around both of them. Some of them are figures who take instructions directly from the presidency. So it affects them in, I would argue, in quite a direct way. And I think we've seen a rapid fire of statements from the president's office ever since this whole issue blew up a few days ago, which is indicative of the seriousness with which the president himself takes it. The head of the public service and secretary to the cabinet, who was named, takes his instructions only from one person in this country, and that's the president. So when he's put on this kind of list, it touches on the president himself.
And some people say that any trial that follows from the International Criminal Court's actions here should take place, in fact, in The Hague or in a Kenyan court. Some people say The Hague, some say a Kenyan court. Which do you think it should be?
You know, so David, one of the interesting things about this whole saga is that Parliament right now is scrambling to set up a local tribunal to try these cases here in Kenya. And we've been going back and forth on this for a couple of years. We had the opportunity as a country to set up a local court to try these cases. About 3 times we blew that opportunity in Parliament, and therefore this ended up going to The Hague. That doesn't mean that Kenya still can't set up a local mechanism, in particular because here we're talking about 6 of the figures who the International Criminal Court chief prosecutor has found to be most responsible for the violence that took place. However, you know, at one point over 600,000 people were displaced, thousands of people were killed. We have a lot of victims and perpetrators in Kenya. So a local mechanism that also deals with issues here in Kenya is not an undesirable thing. Part of the reason Kenyans supported the Hague option as the better option was because they felt that it would be less susceptible to local manipulation. Now that the names have been named, there's a sense of political panic that has set into the political class as they realize that this matter is out of their hands and has entered an institution, the ability to manipulate which they don't have.
Do any of the politicians have power to step into this? I mean, the President or the Prime Minister, would they be likely to want to muzzle these talks, or would they be all for it being discussed in open court? I mean, or would they like to close it down now, do you think?
I mean, all the political behavior, the political statements that have come out of the president's office would seem to indicate that the president, I mean, on the face of it, all the statements are saying that they would like to see the process be seen through to its logical conclusion, and they have pledged the support of the Kenya government to the process. Their actions, however, betray the fact that they're deeply uncomfortable with a process of this nature over which they don't have that amount of control. So, but there's a sense in which the train has left the station, it cannot be stopped. I think there will be attempts to derail this process. I think some of those attempts are already underway. However, that is going to have, as I said, major political implications here at home. You know, completely removed from the legal process that it has been embarked upon, and that is going to involve, yes, both the President and the Prime Minister in very immediate ways.
So if we were talking again in 12 months' time, hopefully it'll be sooner, but give it 12 months, by that point, would you say it is certain that these 6 men will have been tried in a court either in Kenya or in The Hague? Would you say it's certain that they will be arraigned, or do you think it could drift without indictment?
The credibility of that kind of process would be highly dubious at this particular time. For an administration that has shown a very determined unwillingness to deal with impunity and these kinds of issues, even if a local mechanism was set up, as it were, to try and replace or be ahead of the International Criminal Court, the credibility of such a process would be extremely dubious, and I don't think would have the confidence of the majority of Kenyan people. So there's a sense in which the political elite finds themselves stuck in a creation of their own making, and it's extremely uncomfortable. There'll be a lot of wriggling and writhing, and that's gonna have major implications for us here on the ground.
Well, thank you very much indeed. We'll leave you with all the wriggling and writhing. That's a great image there, that phrase. John, thank you for being with us. We'll come back to this story again, of course, but thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
He is often described as the best living humorist in America. David Sedaris is his name. He's sold millions of books, been nominated for a Grammy, and packed out Carnegie Hall. But he still manages somehow or other to keep a low profile here in London. Luckily for us, however, he made an exception to that rule when I met him to talk to him earlier about his new book, just in time for Christmas, Squirrel Seeks Chipmunk, out now. Why did you decide to do a bestiary and so on? You haven't been that crazy about animals in a lot of your life, have you?
Well, I'm not a big pet owner, but what happened is I love audiobooks, and so somebody gave me an audiobook, and it was a collection of South African folk tales. And I started listening to it, and it was just awful. It was like the lion married a giraffe, and on their wedding night, he ripped her throat out. Be careful who you marry. And I thought, oh, I can do better than that. So I just started writing these little animal stories.
Animal stories and so on, yeah. And I mean, basically, when did you realize that you were very funny?
Oh, golly. I think when I was in college, I'd been writing. I dropped in and out of college. So I started writing when I was 20, and when I was 27, I went back to school, and I read something in class one day, and people responded to it. And it just felt right to me. I thought, oh, this is what I was meant to do, is read out loud in front of people and make them laugh.
So do you have a plan, David, for life in the future? I mean, do you have an ambition that you're aiming at way in ahead, 20 years' time?
I plan to die in 9 years. I'm going to die.
In 9 years?
Yeah, at the age of 62. My mother was 62 when she died. Right. And so I told myself years ago that that's when I was going to die.
Where are you going to die?
Oh, I never thought about where. Oh, goodness. It never occurred. I'm going to have to work on that. I'm
yeah.
going to
I think that's another,
work on the place.
That's another
yeah.
chapter there, I think, don't you think? Yeah. Where, and also in what way? There's a whole, looking at death, you've got a whole future there. Well, there's a future in death for you.
Well, my mother died of lung cancer, and then she smoked all her life, and then I quit smoking 4 years ago. But that's not enough to save you. No. I only pray that my cancer is above the waist. That's all I want. Is it my cancer? Because you know, when your cancer is below the waist, people imagine all the plumbing problems. So above the waist, cancer, 9 years.
Really? Yeah. And it would just be cleaner that way, you feel?
I do.
No, yes, David, thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Good fun. After the break, I'll be talking to the Justice Minister of Lebanon,